So far we have established that to claim to know something which does not exist is the ultimate contradiction of experience, and to teach this contradiction as though it is a truth which applies to everybody else demonstrates a complete inability to understand and profit from experience and is therefore one of the definitions of stupidity. But to claim to know what you have experienced through raw empiricism could be a completely fair claim. The process that takes us from raw empiricism to refined knowledge is the process known as argumentation. This video will explore how raw empiricism can be organized to give substance to a claim, and how a well-substantiated claim can give rise to reassurance. One quick note before we begin. The traditional model of argumentation calls this layer data. I prefer to call it facts because my particular claim is that truth is absolute, and to me, data seems to imply that anything goes. That being said, here we go. When you sit at a piano and play this note, you will hear this sound. If you play this note repeatedly, you will hear this sound repeatedly. If you repeat this enough, your mind will eventually come to associate this note with this sound, and that association is called a sign. Once you know that sign, then you can know that whenever you hear this sound, that note was played. The reason you know that is called argument by sign. When you hear a bunch of notes at the same time, they come to define what's called in music a chord. In argumentation, it's called argument by definition, and argument by definition is when you know which signs apply. So let's say you hear this chord and you know that these were the notes that made it up. You can say that you know what chord this was by definition of these notes. A bunch of chords put together gives rise to what's called a function. In argumentation, a function is knowing which definitions apply. So, for example, you hear these notes, they give rise to either this kind of a chord, or this kind of a chord, or this kind of a chord, or this kind of a chord, and you're not sure which until you know which chords come before it and after it. When you know which chords come before it and after it, then you know which definition applies. So in this instance, these notes came to define this kind of a chord and not any other because of how it functioned. Argument by function is knowing which definitions apply. When you understand how something functions, then you can turn around and use it to your advantage. That is the height of knowledge, because it was at that stage that the raw empiricism became something useful. The way to substantiate that you do know it is to be able to describe how you know it through this process of argumentation. This music example is just an analogy. It doesn't actually help anybody unless they make it a sign by relating to it. If you don't yet understand these concepts or you want to practice them more, then go ahead and go through the practice videos. But right here we're going to go on to how a well-substantiated claim can give rise to reassurance. Let's imagine that you're traveling to a new city for the first time, you're on a business trip. When you break for lunch, you decide you want some pizza, and you go ask somebody on the street where a pizza place is. And he says, "I don't know, I'm not from here." So you ask somebody else, and he says, "I don't know, I'm not from here." And you get 7 people who give you 7 I don't knows, and then you find a security guard. Now you trust that he would know, because you trust that his comprehension of the city is accurate. So when he tells you that he knows where it is, you can take his word for it, and you can confidently make your way to the pizza joint, and even though you can't see anything about the joint on your way there, you can still know that you have it on good authority that it will be there when you get there. Trusting that his comprehension of the city is accurate is the same as trusting that his reasoning is true. The truth about the location of the pizza joint is not relative. It does not depend on what the security guard wanted it to be or what you wished it to be. The pizza joint is where it is. That is the truth. And if you want any pizza for lunch, then your authority on how to get there has to be the truth. If everybody in the city had an accurate comprehension of the city, then they would all conclude that the pizza joint is where it is. In other words, if all those people could accurately comprehend the city, then they would all conclude the same truth. The truth cannot be relative, only people's comprehension of it. Trusting the security guard's directions to get you to the right place is in effect giving him temporary authorship of your comprehension of the city. And since his comprehension of the city was close enough to the truth, this turned out to be very helpful. And trusting that he already knew is why you didn't have to know. This trust is known as religion, and in this case, the security guard was a religious authority. When you are surrounded by many different religious authorities, and they all have different comprehensions of the world around them, you can know that not all of those comprehensions are the truth. What's especially curious is when one of these religious authorities claims to be the truth by saying literally, "I am the truth." What's more is other religious authorities who have come to know this one have said at various times throughout history that at some point during their reasoning, truth itself spoke back to their reason and gave them a better comprehension of the world around them. That moment where truth speaks back is known as prophecy. For the next 3 videos, I want to establish that it does in fact exist, and that it occurs through association with this authority figure who calls himself the truth. This is an exploration of Christianity. Now, if anybody here knows anything about me, it is that I hate tradition. I want understanding, not a bandwagon. I do not want any association with traditional Christianity where it would claim that the Bible is the sole reconciliation between man's internal empiricism and God's absolute truth. I do not believe that because I see no reason to believe that. So in order to establish that there need to be other grounds for considering Christianity, I want to explore first the Holy Bible's many, many shortcomings.